in addition to Dr. Lemons, we have Carl Maza, who is the founding chair of the Lehman Reentry Committee. Tanya, I did not check with you about how you pronounce your last name. Is it Krupat? Yes, I did it right? Okay, great. Feel free to unmute yourselves. And we also have on the line Brian Davis and Tyreek Davis, who can talk about their lived experience as it relates to what we just watched. Welcome, both of you. Welcome all of you, actually, to the panel discussion. So, first I thought it would be helpful to get your responses to the film and what you saw and how it resonates with your experiences. Brian and Tyreek, perhaps you might want to start by saying what you thought about the film and how it resonated with you. Brian, I think you're muted. I'm going to unmute you, but I think you need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I thought the film was great. I mean, I did 25 years in prison, and it pretty much I could relate to every aspect of that film and what everybody pretty much articulated their experiences, whether it was their upbringing, the college program, and just having the dialogues and networking with people and meeting different people, how it affects my family, and I mean, just every aspect of it, I really appreciated that film. I mean, in regards to like, when you ask direct questions in regards to what you really want me to speak about, I can pretty much speak about it all.
What did you think, Tyreek?
I agree with a lot of what my dad said. Having 25 years of no one to guide me through everything I needed guidance through makes it difficult to learn what a family should look like. And this film helped explore and like talk about the same thing from different perspectives. So it was really powerful to watch.
Yeah, I can imagine that it was a little emotional. I mean, I found myself getting pretty emotional, especially as it related to the folks talking about Othello, for example, right? And talking about how, I mean, that's really the essence of humanities, right? Is to read through a text or to get an education that also helps you to expand your feeling of being connected to something broader than just yourself and your own experience. Because I think ultimately prison is meant to be dehumanizing. And so to have an experience where you're allowed to become more human seems to be a profound, but also a contradictory experience, right? It sounded like there were these multiple identities that folks kept bringing up that they were navigating. Tanya, you're nodding.
Yeah, I have a nodding problem whenever I agree with people. I can't help but nod like crazily. So, but just, it's great to meet you, Brian and Tyreek. I think it's such an incredibly powerful film. And I'm at the Osborne Association and have worked with children and youth whose parents are incarcerated for more than 20 years. So I was also just, it's so tragic, right? That people are, like the two quotes someone said, they teach you how smart you are. And another of the women said, like, I didn't know I was capable of this. And ideally that would have happened pre-prison, right? I mean, it's so powerful that this program is there, thank goodness. But the potential, the brilliance, the talent, the hunger, that was there before prison. And it should have been nurtured. And we just are such a punitive, racist, society, that there's a tragedy in hearing such brilliant people be locked up. And then just in my experience working with children, just the way the students could find themselves in this literature. We also want the young people who are navigating this such a difficult experience of not having your parent physically present with you to also see themselves and to find spaces where your reality is named and you're included and your future and brilliance is nurtured. Because we also find often there's like a guilt by association, and sometimes the expectations are lower for the children because of where their parents are. And so we work really hard not to have the future and potential of children whose parents are incarcerated be limited at all. So I'll just stop there, but happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I was really struck by the multi-generational experiences that were raised in the film as well. You know, that there were multiple, both women and men, who talked about not only am I in prison, but I think it was Tamara who was talking about her brother being in prison and not wanting to write letters back and forth from prison to prison. But you know, we know that there are the generational impacts of incarceration as well. I think Victor Rivera is trying to ask a question, so I'm going to allow Victor for you to talk. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Just first that, you know, I mean, again, you know, very moving and very impactful. I don't know why I can't, you guys see me on the screen?
No, we can't because you're not a panelist.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just, all right, I'm sorry. But just, you know, I mean, I guess the most powerful, Jose. I guess to me, the most powerful thing, you know, was, and something that I want to speak about was, you know, when Sohon Shang, you know, shared about how when they leave the graduation, right? Mm-hmm. And they're congratulated, right? But then when they walk into the reality, right? You know, how we had to face that reality of no matter what accomplishment we do, when we're in there, right? We still can't lose the reality. And how important it is for, you know, organizations like Osborne and BPHN and Fortune Society who are in the prisons, right? To make sure that we foster that greatness that they got when they walked out of the auditorium, right? And not to let themselves be re-imprisoned again. Yes, it's a reality, right? Because yes, you know, there's an incarceration still there, and yes, you're still behind bars, but not to let them forget that greatness of what they accomplished, right? So that they can continue to achieve. But very powerful movie. And, you know, I'm here in any way. I hope that, you know, when some of those graduates come out, they can come to my organization and get a job.
Thank you, Victor. So I guess I'm wondering, you know, we haven't heard from you, Carl. You know, what are your thoughts on the film, and you know, how do you think it resonates with what you've seen at Lehman, or you know, with the students? I mean, in all of your many years of work that you've done as well. You're muted, so I'm going to unmute you. But, oh, sorry. There you go. Wait.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We got you.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, it's a very powerful movie. I taught in prison in the college programs for like 20 years, up until 95 when Pataki got rid of them. And then I taught a parenting course for Osborne. Some of the things that I'm most struck with, and I'm going to try to relate it very much to families, is it is so difficult parenting from prison. I think that's especially true for fathers. People, our society generally assume that mothers almost have this natural relationship with their child that lasts all lifelong. But we don't feel the same about fathers. And it's so difficult being a positive role model when you're incarcerated. if you are a boy, family man, and you do something wrong, or you fail a test, or you get in trouble, there's a relative in the background saying, you're just like your father. You're going to end up just like your father. So as a little kid, you get this negative reinforcement that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in many, many ways. Brian and Tyreek's relationship is almost unique because you have this very positive father and this incredibly intelligent young man son. Children have their parents as their first role models, as their first mentors. And if the mentor, if the parent is been classified as a felon, I think being a felon or being labeled a felon is the worst label our society can put on a person. Because what they're saying is that you are such a bad person that you have to be taken away from other people and be put in a cage. That has to negatively affect your self-esteem and self-worth. One of the wonderful things that college programs do, and Tanya said that, and I think it's the line that hit me the most, is the college program teaches you how smart you are. And people have this innate ability to reach out, to be positive. I made a note here. I worked with this young woman years ago, and her uncle was in prison, and her uncle really functioned as a father figure. And when she was about 18 years old, she went and she visited her uncle. They had a very close relationship. And she told her uncle that she had this new boyfriend and how great this boyfriend was and how the way this boyfriend treated her. Towards the end of the conversation, she says, my next visit, I'm going to bring him. You're going to love him. He's a successful drug dealer like you are. And that changed the uncle's life, because he always kept that separate from her, even though it was a family secret. Everybody knew he dealt drugs. But in his niece, this almost daughter wanted to find a man like her uncle, but hooked on to the negative characteristics. And then obviously that would have been disastrous. He's been home many years now. He's been very, very successful. But that was a turning point in his life. And in a way, he was fortunate that she verbalized that. Many times it's not verbalized. A thing that wasn't mentioned in the film is the concept of time. Kids have a very different concept of time than adults do. When we were all children, Christmas could never come. Our birthday could never come. The last day of school could never come. Time moved very, very slow. And the older we get, the faster time moves. So someone may be in prison and they may be down, they only have 2 years left. And if the person in your next cell has 12 years left, you're in a lot better shape than he is. And so you did time, you only have 2 years left. Your kids say, Daddy, when you coming home? And he says, soon. And the kid then goes home and expects soon means Saturday. Soon means next Thursday. And when Daddy doesn't show up on Saturday, or Daddy doesn't show up next Thursday, there's another loss. There's another sense of disappointment, of even being lied to.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Carl. It makes me think of actually something that's a little bit more I guess, timely, which has to do with, we all know that the pandemic has changed a lot of things. It's particularly been impactful, I understand, in prison. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are about how mental health in particular is going to play a role in the fact that families just aren't able to visit their loved ones in the same way. There's not as much contact as was possible before. You know, and I can open that to you, but to anyone on the panel, really, what your thoughts are about how the pandemic is changing what it has been possible in terms of, you know, just keeping the sort of tenuous ties to your family in prison.
Yeah. With incarcerated parents, it's even more tenuous. I could sneak out of my house and visit a relative. When the prisons say no visitors allowed, it's a roadblock. It's a roadblock. One of the things, you know, I think sometimes I teach social work, but social work and sociology is somewhat connected. And I think very often in prison, my work there in prison, of Durkheim's suicide and why people commit suicide. And he has 3 different big categories, one of which is called anomie. And anomie is feeling alone and isolated, even though you're surrounded by people. And I don't believe there's a place greater than prison where people feel alone, even though they're surrounded by people all day long. While the film was going on, I was thinking of the men that I've worked with in reentry and mentoring and stuff. And unlike the men in my life who is not associated with incarceration or criminal justice, practically every phone call, at the end of the phone call, I would say, for example, "Love you, Brian." And he would say back to me, "Love you, Doc." That doesn't happen with my male relationships that are not related to incarceration. And I think that you are incarcerated and you feel so lonely and so isolated that you have a great sensitivity to other people who care about you. Men generally are not great in discussing their feelings. But I think incarcerated men, because of their experience, is much more comfortable and much more appreciate the love and affection of other people.
What do you think about that, Mr. Davis? Does that seem true to you?
Most definitely. I think and you have that enlightenment. I mean, I don't know if everybody experienced this, but me personally, when I had that enlightenment where that light just went off in my head and everything seemed so clear, and you begin to, like, I never really, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate my own life. And then you have that appreciation of life and the life of others. And so, I mean, when you meet people, you genuinely care about their well-being. So to say I love you and then really mean it is, you know what I'm saying? So I understand where he's coming from when he said that. And that's pretty much where we come from right now. I mean, when you really value life and you value the life of others, it's the most easiest but genuinest thing to say, I love you, my brother, and, you know, say my sister, and it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I must, you know, Penny Prince, who's also on the call, who is part of the Reentry Committee, is talking about how, knowing how important visits and letters are, but also, you know, just how important it is to keep that connection. I think my personal experience has been feeling like I think we all have all these stereotypes about people who are incarcerated, even though we know that the system is stacked against certain people in different ways. And so we understand that these are stereotypes, and at the same time, I think there's a feeling that prison hardens you, not that it would soften you, in, you know, in the sense that it makes you more empathetic. So I mean, I wonder if other people are surprised to learn that you have that appreciation and that connection to others.
Yeah, I think to each his own. I mean, how it affects you or how you allow imprisonment or incarceration to affect you. I mean, me personally, I think when I had that enlightenment, my son was born. Tyreek was just born 5 months and 24 days before I actually went to prison. And that was a change for me. That was the awakening for me. I'm a father. So unfortunately, I was already indulged in a lifestyle that was detrimental to my family and my well-being. But I didn't know no other way how to make a transition. But I knew that I must find that way. Even when I was in prison, my first days, I said it had to be a better way. And I chose to seek that. And I was motivated by my son, you know what I'm saying, my family. I mean, in the film that we was just watching, the Asian brother spoke about how he dishonored his mother and his father or whatever so forth. I felt that very same way. I mean, you going through all these emotions and everything is just now you see it now so clearly. But it's really all about how you make that transition though. And you don't have that roadmap, but you seeking it and finding it, and you're motivated by you want to live. You want to be a better father, a better son, a better uncle, and so on and so forth. And that was my motivation. So I mean, it's so much. I really appreciate that film. Watching that part two, I didn't get to watch all of part one because I was just so busy. But nevertheless, I can just only imagine how the second half of that part one was, and then seeing part two right now with y'all, and it's just very moving and touching. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Tyreek, I wonder if you could talk about being that inspiration, like, and also, I mean, you mentioned a little bit earlier how you felt like you didn't necessarily have the guidance that, or the sense of a family, you know, as I think some of the people really talked about in the film. Can you talk about how you cope with that, and you know, how you and your father sort of began to work through that to end up where you are now?
Well, it's been a long journey, and I guess this goes back to the topic or the point you made about time, where in COVID it's now even more stressed. But even before that, I could only hear my father's voice for 30 minutes if he had time to call me, and I needed sometimes more than 30 minutes, but we didn't understand that. And so, like you said, there's a lot of emotions that come through your mind as you're growing up, as you're changing into a man. You don't really know how to deal with them, so you deal with them in the wrong ways. You turn to the wrong paths, just looking for any type of path. It's very difficult to find that anymore. But because sometimes his voice was the only time I heard "I love you" in a day, I always like tried to do better because I didn't want to disappoint him. So. Yeah.
It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I know it must be difficult to talk about your personal feelings related to your relationship in front of people you don't know. So I really respect that you're letting us in and giving us insight into your experience, because I think part of humanizing the journey has to do with hearing people who have lived experiences. I think it was Sebastian, the Asian young man, who was talking about having an obligation to tell our stories, because otherwise, you know, systems of dehumanization can keep you dehumanized, and then you're just an abstract notion. You know, people talk about families who deal with incarceration. They don't see faces and they don't hear what it's like to just have a few minutes to talk to your father, to talk to, you know, a person who was key to shaping you, but had their own, you know, impediments to that. So thank you for that. I also want to just remind the audience that you're welcome to put a question in the Q&A if you have one. Otherwise, we can begin to wrap up.
I was just going to add something, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is so powerful. Thank you, Tyreek and Brian. And I was curious, just the same way that we heard from the students who are in prison, the power of coming together and the sharing that was possible and kind of the building of community, that's just as important for children and young people who have incarcerated parents. And even though there's more than 2 million children in that situation, I've never met anyone who didn't feel alone in that at some point, if not often. And I'm curious, Tyreek, your experience, but we run programs at Osborne, a Youth Action Council and a Youth Experience Success programs, that the power of bringing young people together who can share the frustration of having only 30 minutes or having your phone call interrupted to remind you that the call is from a correctional facility as if you need it, or you don't need that, and to have your visits overseen, and just the constant reminders, just as the men spoke about that, the horror of going back and being searched after a visit. There's parallel kind of realities crashing in on you, I think, for the children and the youth when you have to leave a visit, when you can't have a visit, or right now in COVID especially, like you can't visit and people are so worried and panicked about their parents. So I'm wondering if you had that opportunity to meet other young people who were navigating the same situation, or any words or thoughts you have on that, Tyreek.
I've had family as well as friends that go through the situation, and I think the best way to move about it with those kind of people is just show them love as well, because you don't know what they're dealing with. You just want everyone to kind of just have a blessed day, no matter what struggle they might have to face. And pass along that power, which is the light within you. People can't visit their families right now because isolating, and it's hard to deal with as it is already, and now you don't have that support, so they're kind of locked away from their lights, and now they have to look for each other, but they can barely even do that as is. I could not begin to imagine to have to deal with that every day.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Tanya. Someone has a question about the dual education system. I think it was brought up by Wesley Keynes, who was on our first call, who was a BPI alum and also, I think, chief of staff at the Bronx Defenders. And he talked about feeling cheated by his early education because of what he learned while he was in prison. And he talked about this dual education system. So I don't know if Tanya, if you want to talk more about that, or Carl, or either one of you.
I mean, we work at Osborne. We coordinate something called the New York Initiative for Children of Incarcerated Parents, and that's a collaborative to bring government agencies and different entities, community-based organizations and others together, because there isn't an organization or an agency that's looking out for children who have incarcerated parents. And so in that, we look at schools and how schools can support students with incarcerated parents. I think there's two aspects to your question: what the educational system that fails so many students. And I was reminded there's a really powerful documentary called Pushouts, to try to reframe. We used to say people who dropped out, but often it's more likely students feel pushed out. The system, further isolates them or is so punitive. And now there's a big movement to get police out of schools, and what is to reimagine school safety so that school would actually feel welcoming and inclusive. So I have worked more on how do we support students whose parents are incarcerated so that there isn't a dual system, but there's one that supports all students and also is validating of their realities. And we've seen really powerful examples when schools can actually involve an incarcerated parent, send the report card to the parent, or even do parent-teacher conferences by phone. And when the child or young person goes on a visit and the parent says, "I talked to your teacher," the power of that is like, "Oh, you did?" And that has, can have positive implications, or even as we saw in the film, when the parents are pursuing their education, that's inspiring for students. So that's kind of speaking to your question and kind of not, but we are actually in October, this is our 6th annual See Us Support Us month. So every October we really focus in on what children of incarcerated parents need and actually work with young people, because it's not me who tells them what they need. They know what they need. We just want to create the platform for them to share and speak that nationally and in New York. And this year it's focusing on schools actually, and how everyone involved in a school, from the school safety officer to in the cafeteria to social work to teachers, can support students whose parents are incarcerated. And then also, because if you have to go through a metal detector at school and you've just gone through a metal detector when you visited your parent, that's re-traumatizing, and it's just, you're feeling like you're being told something about who you are and who you're supposed to be. So we don't want that to happen. And there has been a study that showed that teachers had lower expectations of the students who had an incarcerated mother in that particular study. So I think one thing that was really clear in the film and the dual education system is, we all live into the future that people see for us, right? And if we're told, from the very beginning, you're going to college, then you kind of see that path for yourself. And if you're told otherwise, you see a different path. So we want to work to, I don't want to say flatten that out, but that everyone would have a bright future and get that experience. And we actually had a woman, a teenager in our program, who aspired to be a foreign language interpreter for a government agency. She wanted to be a language interpreter, and someone in her school told her because her dad was incarcerated, she could never work for the government. And so she had to give up her dream, was what she was told. So there's all these like microaggressions and false associations. And thankfully she was part of a program that said, that's crazy. Like, imagine if all of us were limited by our parents' choices, or, you get to live your own life. And you can be that, and you should not give up your dream. But there's all the ways that things like that happen and aren't caught or corrected. And because of that, then a child or a young person can feel like they can't pursue their dreams, or they're not, supposed to. So that's a roundabout way. But I encourage everyone, we have a See Us Support Us website where we're going to post information, and anyone who's interested in getting involved or sharing your story or your wisdom or helping us develop messaging, we'd love your involvement.
There are a couple of questions here about how difficult it is for people who are returning home with college degrees to find employment. Do we have a sense of that landscape, I think especially now?
It is obviously difficult. And very few people are going to come out of prison, even with a college degree, and land their dream job. In most part, any student who comes to Lehman and graduates from Lehman, their first job more than likely is not going to be that dream job. There's so many factors about that. The dream job is available, but you have to work up to it. And in my experience, people in reentry are employable in certain fields much easier than in some other fields. And even if that's not where your heart is, that's your starting point. That's not the goal itself, it's a step towards the goal.
Got it. Ann Rice is also in the Reentry Committee, and she's asking about how Osborne is helping with COVID issues. Do you want to speak to that, Tanya?
Sure. I mean, we're trying to provide all the services that we normally can, but adjust them in different ways. We don't have staff inside the jails and prisons now, and we haven't sort of since COVID arrived. But we're doing a lot virtually like this, and we are meeting people in the community. We are providing reentry supports, connecting people with housing, giving reentry kits. doing job training, doing drug treatment, providing services, and with children and families too. All our programs have had to shift, as we all have, to this new world. But we have our youth leadership program going and our youth action council. So we're trying to, adjust and keep as much going and keep people connected to each other and support them depending on what they need.
That's great. There's someone named Aaron who has had their hand raised, so I'm gonna let you talk. Aaron, I'm not sure if can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. What's your question?
Okay, it was more so of a comment. I wanted to make a connection between one of the discussions in the biochemistry class in the film when they were talking about stem cells versus, I forgot the other type of cell, but with the stem cell, how once you change that cell in that one individual, it actually changes the cells for all the upcoming generations as far as that condition is concerned. And I wanted to relate that to society in the sense that we have to change the system, we have to change society, because the change needs to, like right now, obviously everyone knows there's a big movement for equality and for recognition of how important the lives of Black people are. And if we all notice, of course, the majority of the people in prison were men of color. And it's not obviously that these are dumb people or stupid people or whatever. A lot of them have not had the opportunities. They did not have someone to mentor them, someone to support them, someone to love them the way that they needed to be loved and to show them that guidance. And a lot of it is because I guess based on, especially like Mr. Davis was in prison, and that impacted, obviously his son knows that he loves him, but that impacted his son in the sense that his dad is away and his dad is not able to be in his life the way both of them would like him to be in his life. So we need to change so many different things by starting now, I think. Obviously, we should have started much sooner, but if we start now with changing beliefs and opportunities, creating more opportunities, and just giving people the opportunity to have the same chances and choices as people that are not of color.
Right.
That can change things and really impact so many more generations, just like using stem cell science does.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Brian, did you have, I thought you gestured. Did you want, this is something that you
Yeah, I did. I think I did gesture on the aspect when we was talking about prison. I think it was, Dr. Massa spoke on it in that regards, but I don't want to take us off cue, so we can move on.
Okay. I think there's probably another question.
I'd like to answer Ms. Carrier Davis real quick.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I completely agree with that sentiment. I think a lot of that starts with education, like Tanya has worked on at Osborne. Just giving children the ability to explore what they would like to is what we're usually is. We're not getting that love at home. At least we can go to school and enjoy our time and kind of get lost in the imagination of what life can be.
Tyreek, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, so I'm not sure why, but there's one glitch.
I was really,
oh,
I was
perfect.
thinking off really, yeah, it starts with education at the end of the day. I completely agree with you, Ms. Carrier Davis.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like we have other questions, but I did want to also let everyone know that the Lehman College Reentry Committee has a website, and it's, so you can look up the Lehman Reentry Committee, and you can join our efforts if you would like to get involved. And we are going to have the screening for the next part of College Behind Bars on August 20th, in commemoration of Black August, which, is all about all of the different things related to Black liberation that have happened in August over the years. And then the final screening will be part 4, which will be in September. And I'll follow up with everyone who was on the call with links for those things and that information, so you can save the date. But any other closing thoughts that any of you have?
Just thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for making time to join us. I know that it's a big chunk of time in the middle of the summer, and that it is kind of an intense thing to talk about and to revisit. I imagine in a pseudo public forum. So thank you so much for your time and for visiting with us. Thank you, Carl and Tanya, for your for sharing your expertise with us, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.